Hi everyone and welcome to the first part of a new series, Grandmaster Games, which will showcase games played by masters and grandmasters from the past and present as well. And what better way to begin than from a game by one of the greats, Bobby Fischer himself. Now I'll just take a moment to mention a few names first who are supporting my Twitch channel as well as this video. And they are Seclusive Scribe, who subscribed on my Twitch channel a few days ago. He's a viewer on my stream and a good chess player. rreyv, once again a regular viewer and 2-month subscriber, who also gifted a subscription to another viewer on my stream, Ilyas Hamimi. Now Ilyas has been a regular viewer on my stream and his productive feedback and interaction both on and off my stream is noteworthy. And then we have Mario Gomez, who is another regular viewer and strong blitz player. So a shout out to them. Thank you very much for the support, much appreciated. And now the customary quote, which is also from Bobby Fischer. Your body has to be in top condition. Your chest deteriorates as your body does. You can't separate body from mind. And the quote highlights an important point, which is that chess is not just about taking a seat and tapping into our mind, but also preparing the mind for battle on the chessboard. And this is the reason why many top players include physical activities in their training as well. For example, according to Viswanathan Anand, he goes to the gym every day and tries to maintain physical fitness. Similarly, Alexander Alekhine liked playing ping pong in his spare time. And then we have the example of Fischer himself, quoting an article by Shelby Lehman. Physicality crucial in seated combat too. Fischer's trainer Harry Schneider said he really believed in a good preparation. He loved power training with weights. He swam 45 minutes a day and he was a world champion walker. He also drank pints of carrot juice and ate a lot of salads. He took a sauna every day and a massage. That was his daily routine. His athleticism was apparent to talk show host Dick Cavett, who interviewed him before the 72 title match and later observed, "There appeared somewhat disconcerted a tall and handsome lad with football player shoulders." Asked by Cavett what he would have liked to become had he not excelled in chess, Fischer replied, "Something in sports." So the next time you are about to take part in an important chess tournament, be sure to take time out for some jogging, some swimming, or you could even try catching a chicken like Rocky. Now, there was a lot of hype surrounding the World Chess Championship in 1972 between Bobby and Spassky, given the media coverage and ongoing Cold War between the Soviet Union and US, where both sides were trying to show that they were better than their counterparts at pretty much everything. Just like the space race where the Soviets had succeeded in sending the first man into space, chess had been dominated by the Soviets for a good 24 years till then. As such, there was a lot of pressure on Spassky, who was the current reigning world chess champion, to win the event against one of the strongest chess players to emerge out of the US. And at the start of Game 3, Bobby was down 2-0 against Spassky after losing his bishop in an endgame blunder in Game 1. In Game 2, he simply refused to show up, demanding that all cameras be removed from the playing area. Only a last-minute agreement by Spassky to play away from the cameras allowed Game 3 in a backstage room, away from the crowd of people, which some say was a psychological mistake on behalf of Spassky, because he could have simply said no, and he had every right to do so as the reigning world chess champion. He had the right to play in front of a crowd. So yeah, let's get into the moves of the game. Bobby playing with the black pieces and Spassky with the white pieces, and the game started with a d4, knight f6, c4, e6, knight f3 by white, developing the king side knight, c5 by black, and Bobby offering Spassky an opportunity to go down the Benoni defense line, and Spassky accepted with a d5. So after pawn takes on d5, pawn takes on d5, d6. Now a knight to c3 by white, developing the queenside knight, g6 by black, preparing to Ke2 the dark squared bishop over to g7. And now a knight to d2, which is the knight's Tor variation, named after this maneuver of white's kingside knight. And over here the knight can come to c4, from where it is going to add pressure to black's pawn on d6. So now a knight to d7, developing the queenside knight, e4 by white, solidifying the pawn on d5, as well as freeing up this diagonal for its light squared bishop. Bishop to g7 by black, preparing to castle. Similarly, bishop to e2, castling, and here Spassky played, Bobby played a rook f to e8, bringing the rook over to the semi-open file. And here Spassky played a queen to c2, which is a known move in this line. However, the queen on c2 is a bit away from white's king side, and a few moves are possible for black over here, including a knight to e5, or alternatively black can also play a knight to b6, freeing up the movement of this light squared bishop, or it can even play a queen to e7, adding further pressure to this pawn on e4. However, in this position, Bobby came up with a creative way to attack his opponent's king side, and went ahead with a knight to h5, allowing the exchange of the knight for white's light squared bishop. However, after the exchange, black is going to end up with doubled up pawns on the h file, and not only that, black's kingside pawn structure is going to be shattered. So, taking the knight on h5 is best for white. However, when your opponent goes for an odd move like this, you are prompted to think twice, as you would be playing into his hands. And I'm sure Spassky also thought along the same lines at this move. However, he went ahead with a bishop takes on h5. Not taking the knight on h5 would not be so good for white over here. So, let's say if white goes with a move knight to f3, then black has knight to e5, simply moving on with the maneuvering of minor pieces, and black is fine here. So bishop takes on h5, pawn takes on h5. Black has now doubled up pawns on the h file, and its king side pawn structure is a mess. So now a knight to c4 by white, threatening to win the pawn on d6, but now a knight to e5 by black, challenging the knight on c4. And in the knight Tor variation, this is a piece that white would ideally like to hang on to for as long as possible. As such, Spassky played a knight to e3 here, and now a queen to h4 by black. So Bobby's plan now becomes apparent, and this now threatens the move knight to g4, which is going to create an immediate threat of mate on h2 combined with the black queen. And in this position, Spassky went ahead with a passive looking bishop to d2. Better over here would have been something like f3, preventing the knight from coming over to g4, and after that black's attack sort of peters out on the king side. Alternatively, white could also go with the move knight to e2, swinging the queenside knight over to white's king side, given that black has a lot of pressure over here with the queen on h4, aggressively placed knight on e5, which is defended with a bishop as well as a rook on the semi-open file. Not only that, the light squared bishop has a very aggressive diagonal as well. So instead, a bishop to d2, and in this position, an interesting move for black would be a knight to f3 check, which looks a bit scary because pawn takes on f3 is pretty much forced over here. Otherwise white is going to end up getting mated. However, this line fails after the continuation bishop to e5 with immediate threats of mate on h2. So now a rook to e1, making space for the white king to escape via f1 over to e2. However, now a queen to h3, cutting out the f1 square for the white king. But now f4 by white, bishop takes on f4, knight to f1, preventing mate on a mating attack on h2. Now queen to g4 check, blocked with a knight to g3, and the knight is now pinned to the defense of the white king. So black can play the move h4. However, white manages to hang on to the extra piece after the move f3, which threatens the black queen. So queen takes on f3, and now bishop takes on f4. Queen takes on f4, now a knight to h5, which gains a tempo over the black queen. And not only that, this dangerous open g file is not so good for black here. So this line is no good for black. And instead, a knight to g4 was played by black, which once again threatens mate on h2 combined with the black queen. As such, a knight takes on g4, and the touring knight's tour comes to an end. So knight takes on g4 was played by Spassky, and now pawn takes on g4. So Fischer has now managed to eliminate the weakness of doubled up pawns on the h file. And not only that, this pawn gets an automatic push up the board to g4 and sits ever closer to white's king side. So now bishop to f4, which makes sense, bring the bishop over to this important diagonal, because white would not like black's bishop over here on e5. And now a queen to f6. The queen was pretty much alone on h4, and this threatens the loose bishop on f4, and also guards the pawn on d6. And here Spassky made another mistake by playing a g3, which although supports the dark squared bishop, but creates weaknesses in the light squares for white here. Better over here would have been a bishop to g3, simply tucking the bishop away behind the black pawn. So g3, and now a bishop to d7, keeping an eye on this diagonal and preventing the white knight from coming over to b5, from where it can threaten black's pawn on d6 combined with a dark squared bishop. a4, pushing with the a pawn, and now b6 by black, keeping everything solid. So now a rook f to e1, bringing the rook over to the semi-open file. a6, which also prepares the move b5 for black. A rook to e2, preparing to double up the rooks on the e file, but now b5 by black. And here Spassky played a rook a e1, and taking the pawn on b5 is not all that good for white. After the continuation, pawn takes on b5, pawn takes on b5, and let's say if white decides to take the rook on a8, rook takes on a8, rook takes on a8, and black manages to win the a file. And similarly, if white decides not to take the rook and goes with rook to e1, then once again this rook has this nice open a file to itself. So instead, rook to e1, and now queen to g6, adding further pressure to the pawn on e4. And now b3 by white, adding some support to the pawn on a4. A rook to e7, preparing to double up with the rooks, black. But now a queen to d3, which adds further pressure to the pawn on b5. So first a rook to b8, which temporarily keeps an eye on the b5 pawn before swinging over to e8. And in case you're thinking of the move bishop takes on c3 here, then that is not so good for black. After the continuation, queen takes on c3, pawn takes on a4, pawn takes on a4, bishop takes on a4, but now white gets in the move e5, and after pawn takes on e5, white has managed to create a dangerous pass pawn over here, and not only that, black has got disconnected rooks. The bishop is pretty isolated over here on a4, as well as white having a lot of pressure down this e file. So this continuation is not all that good for black. So rook to b8, now pawn takes on b5, pawn takes on b5, b4, but now c4, and this threatens the white queen, and black has a dangerous pass pawn of its own over here, and this also minimizes pawn movement for both sides as well. So queen to d2 by white, which supports the bishop on f4 and creates a queen bishop battery down this diagonal. However, that is not an immediate concern for black, since this poses no immediate threats. So now a rook to e8, doubled up rooks on the e file for black. Rook to e3 by Spassky, having to contend with a passive rook move over here, but that is pretty much all that white can do in this position. So now an h5 by black, just further improving the position before going for any exchanges. Rook back to e2, king to h7, rook back to e3, king back to g8, so a repetition of moves once by Bobby. Now rook back to e2 by white, and here black finally took the knight out on c3. The bishop takes on c3, queen takes on c3, and now rook takes on e4. Rook takes on e4, rook takes on e4, rook takes on e4, now queen takes on e4. So the black queen now comes into the fray, and white's weakened light squares now become apparent. So bishop to h6 by white, which creates an immediate threat of mate on g7 combined with the white queen. As such, a queen to g6 by black, guarding against the mate as well as threatening the loose bishop on h6. And white doesn't have any good moves over here. So a bishop to c1 was played by Spassky, which allows black the move queen to b1, pinning this bishop to the defense of the white king. And here white played king to f1, Spassky trying to activate his king, but after the move bishop to f5, the light squared black bishop joins the party of the light squares, and king to e2 by white, queen to e4 check, blocked with a queen to e3. Now a queen to c2 check, blocked once again with the queen, but now a queen to b3 by black, and here white played a queen to d4. And in this position, the game was adjourned for the day, and Fischer sealed his move, which was seen the next day by Spassky, and after seeing that he had gone with the best move, he resigned. So in this position, there is a winning continuation for black, and if you would like to spot that move, then you can go ahead and pause the video. I will give you a few seconds. The move that Bobby played was a bishop to d3 check. If you found this move, then well done. Otherwise, also well done for trying. And after a bishop to d3 check, white does not have any good moves. So let's say if a king to e3, then black has a queen to d1, which is crushing because this threatens the loose bishop on c1. And if white decides to hang on to the bishop with something like bishop to b2, then simply a queen to f3 check, and there is a forced mate over here for black. After a king to d2, queen to e2 check, king to c1, and queen to c2 is checkmate. And If not, king to e3, and white decides to go with a king to e2, then black simply takes the pawn on b4, and this move comes with a tempo, checking the white king. And by taking the pawn, black manages to create connected fast pawns over here, which are sufficient to win the game. And white cannot block this check with a bishop. In case bishop to d2, then again black has a force mate after a queen to p1 check, bishop back to c1 blocking the check, but now queen takes on c1 is simply checkmate. So there you go, a very creative and intuitive game by Bobby Fischer, and this was the first time that Bobby Fischer won against Spassky at that time, and he went on to win game 5, 6, 8, 10 and 21 to eventually clinch the championship. And as they say, the rest is history. So I hope you enjoyed the game and the video. Drop in a comment or two. Till next time, take care.